Happy Friday! Welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and today I'm going to do the video that has been going around BookTube a bit discussing the highest rated books that you've read on your Goodreads. Does that make sense? I saw this video on Jean and Lauren's channels and I think a few other people have done it and I loved them. It was such an interesting video idea to watch, so I really wanted to do it for mine. So basically what you do is you look at your books on Goodreads that you've read already, sort them by the highest ratings from other people and then discuss the top 10. So basically like these should be the best books you've ever read because they're the ones that are the most popular, and then kind of discuss your thoughts on them. I already have a prediction that mine's going to be like entirely Harry Potter. So I'm going to say that that only counts once, even if all 7 of the books are in the top 10. That would just be a waste of my time. So I'm just going to count it once. Okay, so I go to my red shelf, sort by average rating. Okay, yeah, I was right. All I can see is Harry Potter so far. So, interestingly, the number 1 highest rated book on my Goodreads is Harry Potter and the HalfBlood Prince, which is absolutely not my favourite book I've ever read. It's not even my favourite Harry Potter book I've read. I would actually say it's my least favourite of the series. So me and the general population seem to be in like total disagreement over this. I think it was Lauren who made a good point about this because she had, it was a different series, but books from like later on in the series were at the top of her Goodreads. And she kind of made the point that it does make sense that the later ones in the series are going to be higher rated, even if they're not actually the most popular from the series. But lots of people will have read the first Harry Potter book, and some people won't have liked it. So the rating is going to be like brought down a bit from that. Whereas if you get all the way to Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, you're probably a Harry Potter fan. So the average rating there is going to be higher because people who don't like Harry Potter probably aren't reading and rating those books. So that's probably why that's up there. It's probably not because Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is actually the most popular Harry Potter book. It's just like, it's a numbers game. Anyway, Harry Potter as a whole, I do really enjoy. I wouldn't put any of those books in my like top 10 books I've ever read, but I do really enjoy this series. I came to it quite late, and I think also I enjoyed it because I enjoyed finally like being part of the cultural moment that is Harry Potter, and me and my sister read them at the same time, so we were having fun like doing quizzes for each other as we went. So yeah, I think Harry Potter's great, but I wouldn't put it in my top 10. Here's Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I forgot to hold it up while I was talking. I have to scroll so far down to get anything that isn't Harry Potter. Okay, number 2 is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. That's a great shout. So The Hate U Give, I'm actually really pleased to see that so high up in there. This is such a brilliant book. It's a YA book, but it's a really good crossover one, so even if you don't usually read YA, I'd really recommend it. So it's about a young black teenage girl who goes to a predominantly white school in a much kind of richer neighbourhood from where she lives. And she kind of finds a way to like coexist between both worlds and feels part of both, but also a bit of an outsider in both. But her best friend from home is killed right at the beginning of the book by a police officer who makes a snap judgment about him based on him being a black boy, because he goes to reach for a hairbrush. The officer thinks it's a gun and freaks out and shoots him, and it's this absolutely harrowing scene. And the book is then about the protests that Star, our main character, becomes involved in her hometown, and the kind of disconnect she feels with some of her white friends taking the side of the police officer and not understanding where she's coming from. It's really, really powerful, and it's about racism, it's about police brutality, but it's also about the differences that we can make and about the power of protest and the power of going out there and having your voice heard, even though for Star it's actually this really dangerous move for her. Yeah, it's just absolutely brilliant, and there's a film as well which is fantastic. It's so sad, but I'm so glad this one's so high up. It really deserves it. Number 3 is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is quite a weird mix. Let me grab that one. This is another book that I absolutely loved and gave 5 stars, so I'm really glad to see it here. This is a graphic novel about the Holocaust, but the characters are drawn as mice. So that sounds really strange. To write this book, Art Spiegelman interviewed his father, who had been in a concentration camp during the Holocaust and had survived. And at the time of writing this, Art and his father actually had a really strained relationship. His father was not an easy man. So it's partly about exploring their relationship, it's partly about exploring his father's memories of his experience during the Holocaust and how terrible that was. And then it's just this really interesting illustration style where the Jewish people are drawn as mice and the Germans, the Nazis, as cats. And I absolutely loved this one. I read it with my book club and I thought it was so so powerful and moving. Really, really hard to read all of the stuff set during the Holocaust, obviously. And really fascinating and sad and moving to read about his relationship with his father, and how there's one bit that really stuck with me where he talks about being in the car with his father and pulling over to pick up a hitchhiker who was black, and his father afterwards being racist towards this hitchhiker, basically saying he shouldn't have picked him up because black people can't be trusted. And I thought that was so interesting from somebody who had lived through one of the worst case scenarios of how discrimination can be so destructive and terrible, and had experienced being discriminated against just because of who he was born as, could then be racist to somebody else. That was just so interesting to me, that disconnect there. And halfway through the book, so this is volumes 1 and 2. After volume 1, his father died. So volume 2 has quite a different tone. He feels quite bitter, and he really, really struggled with the death of his father. This book won the Pulitzer Prize. It's fantastic. I love it. A lot of us in my book club when we read this one hadn't read many graphic novels before, but I think everybody found it really readable, really accessible, even if you're not used to graphic novels. So yeah, I'm really glad this one's in here as well. Number 4 is a book called Tommy Glover's Sketch of Heaven by Jane Bailey, which I honestly have no memory of ever reading. Goodreads says that I read it in 2005. I don't remember what it is, what it's about, if I liked it or not. That's so funny that it is that highly rated. Apparently it's set during World War II, and it's about a young girl who was an evacuee. Wow, okay. I have no memory of that, and also what's weird is that I've never heard about that since. It's not like it's a book I've heard a lot of people talking about. So I'm really surprised to see that so high up in the ratings, but great, maybe I should read that one again. Number 5 is A Boy Made of Blocks by Keith Stuart. This is so interesting. This is not what I expected. I was expecting the top books to be stuff like Harry Potter, to be way more popular books. So A Boy Made of Blocks is a book I really liked. I gave it 4 stars. It's fiction, but very much based on the author's real experiences of his son who is autistic. The father basically had split up with the mother, so didn't have a great relationship with his son anyway because of this, and kind of at the beginning feels like he's not a very good father and doesn't really connect with his son or know very much about autism. This is what I remember. I might be wrong about this, but he learns to bond with his son through playing Minecraft. So the book really taught me a lot about autism that I didn't know about before. Also a lot about parenthood and fatherhood in general. Taught me some stuff about Minecraft. Didn't really know anything about that before. And I'd written on Goodreads here that it made me sob, so apparently it made me cry as well. Book number 6 is a book called Last Seen by Lucy Clarke, which I gave 3 stars and then gave away. This is a thriller. So this is set in a seaside community, and 7 years ago 2 boys had gone into the sea and gone missing, and only one of them had come back. And it's about the aftermath of that, and the mothers of each of the boys and their relationship, and kind of the mystery of what happens to these boys. And I don't remember much about it. I only gave it a 3. I do remember reading this one, and I remember it being perfectly readable and page turning, but kind of nothing special, and didn't blow me away. So another surprise to see that so high up. Number 7 was a 5-star read for me. This is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I have talked about this one a lot recently already. I think this was in my top books of 2019, so I'll link to that video below. So this is set in North Carolina, and we have these 2 timelines. One of them that's following this girl called Kaya growing up, and she lives in the marshlands in this little shack basically, and her family kind of one by one desert her. So from when she's very, very young, she just completely learns to fend for herself. So she's a total outsider. She doesn't even go to school. She doesn't wear shoes. The villagers basically just avoid her. They call her the marsh girl. But she's actually this just fascinating young girl, and she learns so much about nature. So without having a formal education, she actually is basically a scientist, a self-taught scientist, and she knows so much about the wildlife. So she's this really interesting character. The other timeline that we keep flashing forward to is in the 1960s, a young man from that community called Chase Andrews, probably. That sounds like something he might be called. Yeah, Chase Andrews has died, and it was suspected that it was a murder. And Kaya, the marsh girl, is one of the suspects. So we're kind of waiting for the time that these timelines will intersect, and we'll see how she came into his life and why she is implicated in this murder. And I just loved it. It's such a great combination of courtroom drama, because we get some of the court case, partly a mystery, partly a thriller, also partly a love story, and partly just this gorgeous literary nature story. Usually I don't like big, long descriptions of nature, but I loved it in this one. It really brought the marshlands to life for me. It is quite a slow start, so I would say if you pick this one up and you don't get into it straight away, I really recommend that you push on through, because I ended up absolutely loving this one, even though it did take me a little while to get into it, probably because I'm not used to reading stuff that's so descriptive. So at first I wasn't quite sold on it, and then by the end, those bits that I hadn't been sure about ended up being like my favourite bits about it. So yeah, really good. I'm glad that's in there. Number 8 is 100 Nights of Hero. I don't own this one, but I really want to buy it, by Isabel Greenberg. Another graphic novel. So this I really liked. I probably gave it like a 4-star, I think. So this is a sort of retelling of 1001 Nights. So, you know, the story of the woman who is going to be killed by her husband, so she stays up all night telling him stories. Something like that, and we hear all the stories. This is basically like that, but a twist on it. So Hero is the wife of this man who goes away on a trip and basically bets his friend. My wife is so virtuous and chaste that even I haven't been able to sleep with her, so she would never cheat on me. I bet you can't seduce her in 100 nights. So this other man comes and stays in the palace, and his bet is that he will be able to seduce Hero by the end of 100 nights. But Hero actually is in love with her maid, Cherry. The two of them are in a relationship. So they're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to stop this guy who is essentially here to rape her within 100 days? Because it's not like she's going to get a choice in it. So the plan they come up with is that Cherry will tell stories. Or Hero tells stories. Maybe Cherry is the wife and Hero is the maid. I think it's that way around. And Hero tells the stories. And of course, just like in the original story, the man is so enchanted by these stories that he keeps like putting it off. He's like, oh, okay, we'll just listen to one more story and then I'll go back to my bet tomorrow night. And so we get that story, and then we also get all of the individual stories that she tells, and they kind of weave together somehow. And they're pre-existing stories. Some of them I'd never heard before, some of them were quite familiar to me as like random, not particularly famous fairy tales, ones that I'd heard somewhere along the lines. But these are like kind of feminist spins on them. They're all from the perspective of the women. They're all about women's voices and women's stories being told. That's like the theme of the whole book. And like I said, it's a graphic novel. I really liked the illustrations. They were quite unusual. And yeah, it's just a really good one. I actually read it on script, so it was like really small on my screen, so I really want to buy it and then reread it so I can look at the pictures properly. I've lost track. Was that 8, 9? Okay, then we have We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda and Ngozi Adichie. So this is a really short little book. It's non-fiction. It's basically just a TED Talk, I think. That's what it was originally. A TED Talk that Chimamanda Adichie gave about feminism, but just written down into this little book. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. I thought it was great. It's definitely kind of like an intro guide to feminism. So there's probably not going to be anything in here brand new for you if you already read a lot of feminist books or study a lot of feminist theory. But it's I'd recommend it anyway, just as almost to kind of give you like the words for a really succinct argument for feminism, for those people that you come across in your life who still don't quite get it. It's great for that, or to give it to them for them to read. So yeah, I really like that one. I can see why it's up there really highly rated, because it is like this great little guide. I wouldn't personally have put it in there as like one of the best books I've read or the best feminist books I've read, but that's because, to be fair, that's not what it was. This was a TED Talk that has now been turned into a book. So yeah, it's great. And then finally, number 10, one that I've read quite recently, is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. This was absolutely a 5-star read for me. I loved it so much. I read it really quickly, even though it's so long. I often am quite put off, like intimidated by Booker Prize winners, because I feel like they won't be accessible, like they'll be too literary or too experimental. And this one, interestingly, you would think it was, like if you skimmed through it, it is written in a slightly experimental style. It doesn't have any punctuation really, but it is so accessible and so readable. So don't be put off by it. I absolutely loved it. My mum has read it and she had the same worries that it was going to be kind of too experimental for her, and found again that it wasn't. It's so readable. So this is a kind of, it's almost like 12 separate stories of 12 different people, mostly women, mostly black. But it's a novel. It's not 12 separate stories because they interconnect, and the ways they interconnect is the theme of the book, like how connected we are as humans. And I absolutely loved it. It's been described as this kind of portrait of modern day Britain, which I think it is. It works really well as that, but it's also a portrait of womanhood. It's a portrait of blackness, not that I can speak directly to that, and it also to me just felt like a portrait of humans, of humanity, of the ways that we affect each other and are linked together, and I just loved it. I really, really loved it. It's one that I absolutely gave 5 stars to. I really want to reread it again already. I'm already pretty much guaranteeing that it's going to be in my best books of 2020, even though I know we're very early days, but I'm sure you're going to see that one in there. So that was really interesting. Well, I thought it was interesting anyway. Hopefully you did. That was quite a mix in there of books that I did give 5 stars and would have in some of the best books I've ever read, combined with some that I either don't remember or thought were distinctly mediocre, but apparently are really highly rated. Do let me know in the comments below if you've done this challenge, because I find them really interesting videos to watch. And I will link to Jean and Lauren's below as well, so you can see their original takes on it. And of course, do give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button below for new videos every week. Cheers!